Relax. You're not starting over. You are starting wiser. You see, the illusion that life works in neat linear paths is one of the greatest tricks the mind plays on us. We often assume that to begin again is to go backward, to lose ground, to fall behind some invisible schedule the world has set. But in truth, there is no such thing as starting over in the way you fear. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unlive what you have lived. Every moment that brought you here is not lost. It is stored, etched into your being, quietly shaping the way you move forward. Etched. The tree that sheds its leaves every autumn is not dying. It is preparing for a deeper bloom, for stronger roots, for the resilience of spring. In the same way, what you call failure, what you call loss, what you call falling apart, is often life clearing the debris. Not punishment, not regression, but preparation for something more rooted, more aligned with who you've become. The mind, of course, resists this. It likes tidy beginnings. It wants to trace the line from start to finish as if it were a math equation. But the soul understands spirals. It moves through cycles. It returns to places not to repeat, but to re-see, re-choose, recreate with greater clarity. You are not back at square one. You are standing at a new entrance, disguised as a familiar place. And this time, you carry with you the ashes of your old fire, the scars of your old wounds, and the wisdom carved from everything that didn't go the way you planned. How strange it is that we punish ourselves for not being perfect the first time, as if life were a test we must pass without error. But what if the missteps were not mistakes? What if they were invitations? Invitations to wake up, to pay attention, to understand that success isn't a destination but a rhythm, a dance between falling and rising, between doing and undoing, between surrender and movement. You see, wisdom is not in knowing the answer. It's in learning how to listen. It's in learning when to pause, when to stay, when to leave, when to love fully, and when to love from afar. And only experience, only the beautiful ache of living can teach you that. So don't fear the restart. Don't curse the detour. What looks like a setback may be the most direct route to yourself. You are not who you were before. You have shed illusions. You have dropped masks. You have tasted the truth, even if bitter. And once truth enters you, even in fragments, you cannot pretend you do not know it. It becomes the compass that guides you, quietly but insistently. Starting wiser means you no longer rush just because others are sprinting. You no longer chase things that sparkle but don't satisfy. You no longer apologize for the pace or the path your soul needs. It means you recognize that being late by the world's clock may mean you are right on time by eternity's rhythm. The universe doesn't operate in deadlines, it operates in unfoldings. And your life, too, is unfolding in its own strange, sacred way. Not because you got everything right, but because you dared to begin again. This time, with open eyes, with an open heart, with the quiet courage to try once more. Not because you are naive, but because you are finally aware. So relax, breathe. Let go of the narrative that says you failed. You didn't. You lived. You learned. And now you begin again. Not at the beginning, but at a higher octave of the same melody, not empty-handed, but soulful, not lost, but finally becoming. You never go back to zero, you carry experience forward. This is one of the most liberating truths hidden beneath the illusion of starting over. The idea that you're somehow erasing all your progress, all your growth, and all your effort the moment things fall apart is nothing but a cruel misunderstanding of how life actually works. You are not some empty vessel every time you face a new beginning. You are a vessel that has been filled over time. Experience doesn't shout. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It seeps into your being slowly, subtly. The pain you once cursed becomes the wisdom you lean on. The closed door you once banged your fists against becomes the doorway you now thank for not opening. The person who walked away taught you to stand on your own. The job you lost led you toward a calling more aligned with your soul. Life rearranges your reality, sometimes so dramatically that you think everything has been taken away from you. But often, what's really happening is that you're being emptied of illusions so that you can begin again, not naively, but consciously. When a tree loses its leaves, we don't say it has failed. We understand that it's entering a new season, one where growth is happening invisibly, under the surface, within the roots. You too are not failing when things fall apart. You are simply shifting seasons. What was visible is being stripped away so that something deeper can form within you. And just like the tree, you will bloom again, but never as you were before. You'll carry the strength of the storm, the quiet wisdom of winter, the stillness that only comes from surviving. The world may look at you and see someone beginning again. They may say you lost everything. They may call it a restart, but they don't see what you now know. They don't feel the way your soul has expanded. They don't hear the silent wisdom whispering in your decisions, guiding your yes and your no. The truth is, you're never starting from scratch. The person you were before that heartbreak, before that betrayal, before that moment of collapse, is not the person who stands here now. You are layered with understanding that can't be taught in books or classrooms. You've earned something that cannot be measured or immediately seen. And that something walks with you into every new beginning. Starting wiser means your foundation is different now. You no longer build castles on unstable ground. You no longer confuse attention for affection or urgency for purpose. You move more deliberately. You speak more gently to yourself. You understand now that setbacks are not punishments. They are pauses, often placed with precision to redirect you toward what actually matters. When you carry experience, you carry a filter that helps you recognize what aligns with you and what doesn't. You no longer follow the noise just to feel busy. You wait for the pull that feels like peace. Think about all the things you once thought you needed, the people you thought you couldn't live without, the validation you chased, the dreams that turned out to be cages dressed as freedom. And look at you now. Not bitter, but awake. Not jaded, but discerning. Not empty, but refined. That's what experience does. It refines you. It sharpens your perception. It teaches you that not everything that glitters is gold, and not every closed door is a tragedy. Some are blessings you won't understand until you look back years later and realize you were being saved from something you thought you wanted. The beauty of experience is that it cannot be undone. It shapes your choices in ways you can't even fully comprehend. It's the reason you pause before reacting. It's the reason you walk away from certain arguments. It's the reason you no longer chase after people who show you they don't value your presence. Experience humbles you. It removes the illusion of control and replaces it with faith. It teaches you that starting again doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're brave enough to keep going, wiser, more intentional, and more grounded. You may not have the same excitement you once had. You may not have the same wide-eyed wonder. But you have something better now. You have inner strength. You have discernment. You have clarity. That's what makes this beginning different. Not that the path is easier, but that you walk it with steadier feet. Not that you don't feel fear, but that you've learned not to let it lead you. You've seen what happens when you ignore your instinct. You felt the weight of staying where your soul begged you to leave. You tasted the consequence of silence when you should have spoken. And so now, when you begin again, you do it with a heart that has been molded by experience, not broken, but reshaped. Even in your quiet moments, even when you doubt yourself, your experience speaks. It shows up in the way you no longer tolerate what you once did. It lives in the boundaries you now uphold. It colors your perception of love, of success, of happiness. You no longer want loud applause or fast validation. You want peace. You want alignment. You want depth. You want to wake up in a life that feels true to who you've become, not who you used to be. That desire didn't come from nowhere. It was carved out of everything you've lived through. And a unique beauty in the fact that it's unknown by humanity. So when you feel like you're starting over, take a moment to remember what you carry. Not the weight of regret, but the weight of wisdom. That's the sacred burden of the experienced soul. You don't move as quickly, but you move with purpose. You don't chase as blindly, but you love more wholly. You don't speak as loudly, but your words hold truth. And truth has its own quiet power, one that doesn't demand attention, but transforms everything it touches. You are beginning again, yes. But this time, as someone who knows, wisdom is born through what didn't work. And while the mind may want to run from the memory of those moments, those decisions, those relationships, those dreams that never took shape, the soul knows that in the ache of what failed, something sacred was being formed. We are taught to hide our disappointments, to bury our past errors under the rug of optimism or indifference. But the truth is, those are the very places where wisdom begins, not in the polished successes, but in the wreckage. Not in what went right, but in what went wrong, and how you chose to stand up afterward. There's something profoundly human about failure. It strips away the illusion of control. It shows you that your plans, no matter how carefully constructed, can unravel without notice. It humbles you, breaks down your pride, and forces you to face yourself without your titles, without your accolades, without the stories you told others about who you are. In that nakedness, in that quiet space, where nothing seems to make sense, wisdom is conceived. It doesn't arrive loudly. It grows in the silence, like roots growing beneath the soil. Unseen, but essential. Every disappointment has something to teach you, not to shame you, but to awaken you. We tend to associate wisdom with age or intelligence, but that's not quite accurate. True wisdom comes from experience that has been reflected upon, from pain that has been transmuted into insight. It comes from the tears that taught you how to see more clearly, from the betrayals that revealed the difference between appearance and character, from the long nights when you wrestled with yourself, unsure whether to hold on or to let go. And it is in those very moments, the ones you might wish had never happened, that you were quietly becoming wiser, even if you didn't know it at the time. Every time you trusted someone who proved unworthy, you learned what it feels like when words don't align with actions. Every time you poured yourself into something that didn't yield what you hoped, you discovered the limits of effort alone, without alignment. Every time you ignored that inner whisper and paid the price, you gained a deeper respect for your intuition. These moments of contrast, of internal conflict, they shape you in ways that success never could. Success may feed your ego, but failure feeds your depth. And the most ironic part is that the very things you once begged to be spared from, the heartbreak, the collapse, the delay, the silence, are the very things that formed the strength in you now. They were not mistakes. They were catalysts. Catalysts that took you from believing in fantasy to seeing with clarity, from wishing to knowing, from chasing to attracting. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you face disappointment and refuse to be defined by it, when you've stared at the ruins of your plans and realized that life was not punishing you but preparing you to step into something more honest, more aligned with who you are becoming. Wisdom is what you carry when you've been through the fire and come out softer, not harder. When you've realized that forgiveness is not weakness but freedom. When you've learnt to love without losing yourself. When you've finally understood that not every battle requires your presence, and not every loss is truly a loss. Sometimes it is a redirection, sometimes it is a divine act of mercy disguised as chaos. And only in hindsight do you see that the closed door was the most loving act the universe could offer. There is no book, no mentor, no seminar that can replicate what your own lived experience can teach you. You earn your wisdom in the trenches of real life, through the moments that cracked you open, through the seasons that required more surrender than strength. And it is through those moments that your inner compass was formed. Now you know the feeling of dishonesty in your gut. You recognize when something feels off, even if it looks perfect on the surface. You've learned that your peace is more valuable than attention, and your authenticity is more sacred than popularity. This wisdom that has grown inside of you through everything that didn't work, it's the reason you now move differently. You no longer force what resists you. You no longer beg to be chosen. You no longer contort yourself to fit into places that shrink your spirit. You've seen what happens when you ignore your soul. And you've learned that no amount of external validation is worth internal disconnection. That lesson came at a price, but it gave you back something priceless, yourself. And there's something powerful about that kind of return. When you come back to yourself after years of distraction, years of trying to please or impress or perform, you come back not as a blank slate, but as someone who knows better. You know the cost of self-abandonment. You know the danger of staying too long in places your soul outgrew. You've learned that starting wiser doesn't mean moving with fear. It means moving with reverence. Reverence for your time, your energy, your spirit. You don't rush now. You don't chase now. You allow, you discern, you trust the timing that once frustrated you, because you've seen that wisdom isn't in getting what you want quickly. It's in becoming the kind of person who's ready to receive it fully when it arrives. The things that didn't work taught you what alignment feels like by first showing you misalignment. The people who walked away taught you self-respect by first challenging it. The dreams that didn't manifest taught you that not everything you desire is meant to be pursued, that sometimes the dream must die so the soul can live. And now, because of all that, you carry a wisdom that cannot be shaken, not because you have all the answers, but because you finally know which questions matter. And this is why you are not starting over, you are starting wiser, because now, even in the unknown, you are anchored. Even when you stumble, you recognize the ground beneath you. Even when you lose, you know you are not lost. You are becoming. You are evolving. You are walking forward not in ignorance, but in awareness. And that makes all the difference. Because what once broke you now builds you. What once confused you now clarified. And what once felt like the end is now understood as the beginning of something far more true. You're not repeating, you're returning with new eyes. Life has a strange way of bringing us full circle, but never to the same exact place. What looks like repetition on the outside is often a revelation on the inside. You find yourself in similar settings, facing familiar choices, walking paths you thought you left behind. But the difference now is not the road, it's the traveler. You have changed. You are not who you were the last time you stood here. The ground may look the same, the questions may sound similar, but the soul behind the eyes is carrying more light, more understanding, more awareness of what matters and what does not. It's tempting to feel frustrated when you find yourself back where you started. The old job, the old city, the old habits or relationships resurfacing. It can feel like failure, like you didn't grow at all. But that's only if you judge life by straight lines and upward trajectories. Life doesn't unfold like that. It moves in spirals, in seasons, in deepening layers. You revisit things not because you fail to escape them, but because you're ready to see them differently. You're being asked to face them again, not to repeat the past, but to redeem it. There's a sacred power in returning. It's a second sight, a deeper clarity. The first time you walked through certain storms, you didn't know how to protect your peace. You didn't know how to honor your limits, or when to say no, or how to trust the whisper in your gut over the roar of the world. But now you do. Now you're not as easily swayed. You no longer believe everything you hear, or follow every voice louder than your own. Your discernment has sharpened, not because someone told you what to do, but because you lived through what happens when you don't listen to yourself. And that's why this return is not a mistake. It's not a loop you're stuck in. It's a lesson being completed. A cycle closing itself. A moment for you to make a different choice now that you've seen the truth behind the mask. You're not being punished by life. You're being refined. Given another chance to move from wisdom, not from wounds. Another chance to see the old with new vision and to respond not from pain, but from peace. This is the beauty of life's intelligence. It keeps offering you mirrors, keeps bringing back what you thought you left behind, not to shame you, but to show you how far you've come. Maybe the person you once gave all your power to is back in your orbit. Maybe an opportunity you once mishandled has appeared again. Maybe you're facing a version of yourself that you thought you'd outgrown, but now you know better. You know what it feels like to choose from fear and what it means to choose from trust. You know how it feels to abandon yourself and how sacred it is to stay true, even when it costs you something. There's a quiet confidence in the way you move now. You don't need to prove as much. You don't seek validation like before. You've seen enough to know that not everything that glitters leads to joy, and not every silence is empty. You're learning to read between the lines, to feel the energy behind words, to sense the direction of things before they fully form. That kind of perception doesn't come from reading or talking. It comes from living, from losing, from falling, and rising and falling again. So when you walk into a familiar space, don't look for how it has changed. Look at how you have. Listen to the way you breathe through the discomfort now. Notice the way you protect your peace before pleasing others. Feel the way your nervous system no longer jumps at chaos the way it used to. This is progress. This is wisdom. And this is why you're not repeating. You are completing. You are seeing clearly, finally, what you couldn't see before, because the pain hadn't yet become perspective. And in this clarity, you begin to make decisions that align with your becoming, not your history. You say no where you once said yes. You pause where you once reacted. You walk away where you once clung. You no longer let guilt or obligation dictate your steps. Instead, you allow your peace to lead. You choose not from desperation, but from abundance, not from emptiness, but from fullness, because now you are aware of what you carry and what you are no longer willing to carry. Sometimes returning is not about the place or the person or the situation at all. Sometimes it's about the unfinished part of you that needed closure, needed resolution, needed the chance to say, I know who I am now. And so you revisit, not to repeat history, but to rewrite it, with the pen of wisdom instead of the ink of confusion. You're not trying to fix the past. You're healing it through your present awareness. You're recognizing that the pain you once experienced is no longer running the show. You've stepped into authorship. You're no longer acting from the wound. You're speaking from the scar. And that changes everything. Because now, even in familiar surroundings, you're not the same character. You don't need the same outcomes. You don't need to be right. You don't need to win. You just need to stay true to the voice inside that's been trying to guide you all along. That voice that says, not this time. You're not who you were when this story began. You're more grounded now. You see the traps quicker. You recognize manipulation faster. You no longer let temporary comfort cost you long-term peace. You've learned the difference between settling and surrendering, between compromise and self-betrayal. And most of all, you've learned that returning doesn't mean starting over. It means you're strong enough to stand in the place that once broke you, without breaking this time. This is the evolution that no one can see from the outside. It's internal, it's invisible. But it's real. And it's why your journey is not a repetition, it's a redemption. A soft rewriting of everything that once went wrong. A gentle claiming of everything you thought you had lost. Because the truth is, you didn't lose your chance. You were just becoming the version of you who's finally ready to receive it, with wisdom, with reverence, and with the awareness to keep it. This time you know what not to chase, and that changes everything. In the early stages of life, when we are still learning who we are and what the world expects, We often run toward anything that promises us significance, safety, or affection. We chase titles because we think they make us worthy. We chase people because we think they'll complete us. We chase dreams that were never ours to begin with because they came dressed in admiration and applause. But with time, with pain, with experience, you begin to understand the weight of every pursuit. Not everything is worth chasing, and not every desire comes from your soul. Some come from fear, some from emptiness, some from the need to prove something that no longer matters. When you start again from a place of wisdom, your movements are no longer frantic. You're not propelled by the fear of missing out or the anxiety of falling behind. You start to value alignment over speed, peace over performance, truth over temporary satisfaction. You've chased enough to know what it costs. You've burned yourself trying to keep someone's attention. You've stretched yourself thin to meet standards that were never rooted in love. You've bent your spirit trying to fit into spaces that made your soul ache. And now, because of all that, you understand the sacredness of not running after things that don't call to you in truth. You recognize the hollow echo of false promises. You can feel when an opportunity is more about ego than purpose. You see through the glitter of shallow success. And you've grown tired of pretending to want things that drain you. That's the gift of this season of your life, not just knowing what you do want, but finally seeing clearly what you no longer need to chase. You know now that if something requires you to lose your peace, silence your voice, or betray your values, it isn't a blessing. You've tried to convince yourself before that it was. You've tried to force things into place because you didn't want to let go. But now, you listen when the energy is off. You pay attention when your spirit hesitates. You respect your intuition, even when it whispers. In this new beginning, you move differently. You let go quicker. You don't beg. You don't bargain with life. You don't need everything to work out to feel secure. You've learned that real security is internal. It comes from knowing who you are, what you carry, and what you're no longer willing to chase. You've sat with your fears, you've heard their stories, and you've decided that they don't get to write your future. You've looked at your past patterns and seen where you poured too much into people who gave you too little. There's a deep kind of rest that comes when you stop running after things that aren't meant for you. A calm in your bones, a space in your soul. You no longer feel the urgency to compete. You don't envy those who seem ahead. You trust your own path, your own rhythm. You start seeing the beauty in stillness, the clarity in quiet, the joy in simply being where you are, fully and unapologetically. You begin to realize that many of the things you thought you needed were just distractions, that the love you chased was often a reflection of your own unmet needs, that the validation you sought was a substitute for your own inner voice. And once you see that, truly see it, you can't unsee it. You stop blaming the world, you stop blaming others, you stop blaming yourself, you stop blaming your head, and more wisdom in your heart. You learn to recognize the difference between a soul calling and a survival response. A soul calling is peaceful, even if it's challenging. It feels right even when it's hard. It calls you inward, not outward. It asks you to rise, not to run. But a survival response makes you frantic. It pushes you to chase, to cling, to prove. And now, with the wisdom you've earned, you can feel the difference. You've sat in the aftermath of chasing the wrong thing. You've felt the emptiness of reaching a destination that never satisfied. This doesn't mean you lack ambition. It means your ambition has matured. It's no longer about proving your worth. It's about living your truth. You no longer want everything. You want the right things, the things that align with your soul, the things that feed your spirit, the things that make you more of who you are, not less. You don't want to impress the crowd anymore. You want to be at peace with yourself when the lights are off and the world is quiet. And that shift, this sacred shift, is what makes this beginning so different. You're not starting from desperation. You're starting from discernment. You're not asking, what can I chase? You're asking, what calls me higher? You're not trying to grab everything within reach. You're holding out for what resonates deeply. And because of that, you'll move slower, but you'll move truer. You'll say no more often, but your yes will be wholehearted. You'll walk away from things that once pulled you in, because now you know better. You've grown, you've evolved, you've suffered, and in that suffering, you've found your wisdom. This wisdom is your compass now. It will guide your steps, not by force, but by knowing. You'll no longer need to chase anything that requires you to abandon yourself. That chapter is over. You're no longer addicted to the chase. You're devoted to the truth. You're no longer running toward things, hoping they'll save you. You've already saved yourself by choosing not to run at all. By choosing to stay grounded, by choosing to wait for what feels like home in your soul. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is the clearest sign that you are no longer starting over. You are starting wiser.